Today's guest is an author, chiropractic physician, and specialist in the field of retraining the brain. Over the past 43 years, he has helped more than 15,000 patients improve their mental and emotional health. Today, he's going to share with you new insights, ideas, and information to understand the primary causes of developmental problems and how to fix it. Would you please help me welcome our good friend, Dr. Kelly Miller? Welcome.
Well, thank you, Daniel. I'm so excited about being on your program.
My pleasure. It's wonderful to be
I
here.
love your side of the world.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you open up, ready to go travel there again?
Well, if you could speak to my wife, she tells me her horoscope, and she says, whatever the horoscope is, I've forgotten already. She says, I'm this type of horoscope, and I've got to travel. So she feels that she's a bird with clipped wings, and she's keen to travel. But as somebody who has a preference for introversion, I've actually loved COVID. And she said to me, husband, you've got to get out of the house. And I said, no, I'm introverted. This is my place during COVID. It's my blessing. Now, over the past 43 years in healthcare, what is the one thing that has remained consistent?
Well, for me, it's always been a thirst to learn and knowledge, and continuing to do that. I've always wanted to be on the cutting edge. I always wanted to answer why this didn't work, or what was another solution. So that's been my forte all the time, and I'm always looking for new things and new innovations and new ways to help people.
My car is not going to work without an engine, and my life's not going to work without my brain. But I believe that a lot of people today do have brain imbalances. If we had a brain imbalance, how would I know as an individual that I'm experiencing this? Or if I was a parent, how would I know one of my children are experiencing a brain imbalance?
Well, that's a good question. I think anytime you notice, if we're talking about children, kind of in the big picture that we have today's world, we have about 10 or 15% children classified as dyslexia. And really what dyslexia is a reading problem. They're just having trouble reading. They can't read the words. They can't comprehend what it is they're reading. And then we have about 10% in ADHD world, and there's 3 different types. And then we have about 2.5% in the autism spectrum. So lots of things in children, but basically a inability to learn, accordingly, or they're acting inappropriately socially for their age group, or behavior that's erratic, filtering problems, a lot of impulsivity. A lot of these kids have a problem. I call it the should I or shouldn't I say or do that. And so that's that. And these kids grow up, if we're an ADHD kid, we're going to grow up to be an ADHD adult, and we may learn to compensate for that. I think the biggest thing that we find is probably 2 symptoms is probably anxiety and insomnia. These are 2 real cardinal signs that there's a brain imbalance going on. Why are we anxious? Why are we anxious about all these things? Why are we having trouble sleeping? And when we see generally people brain imbalance, and I see 2-year-olds and I've seen 90-year-olds, I would say those are 2 of the more common symptoms, is anxiety and insomnia. But the one thing they all have is something called primitive reflexes. And these are reflexes that are developed in utero and when we're in mom, and they're to facilitate the birthing process and also our movement in our first year of life, but they're supposed to go away. And there are things like if you put your finger in the baby's hand, they grasp it, hang on to it, or if you touch their cheek, they'll turn to nurse. They turn their head, their arm will come out. So these are all, there's 10 big ones, and they should go away by 12 years old. And when they go away, it helps mature what's called the vagus nerve. Some of you may have heard the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve controls our parasympathetic nervous system. This is our rest and digest. This is our calming part of our nervous system. And if we don't have that, then we're always in fight flight, like the accelerator is working on the car, but the braking system isn't working. So these people it's easier for them to get ramped up, then it's harder for them to ramp down, and their life is kind of like a roller coaster. In the United States, we have 30% of the population is diagnosed with a significant anxiety disorder. I don't know what it is in other countries, but that's big. That's almost a third of the population are having this. So it's a real problem, and it's a hurdle for families, and it's a hurdle for individuals going forward and trying to be successful, keeping jobs and learning and, different things like that. So
You mentioned in utero then. What are some of the primary causes of these developmental problems in the children?
well, we think it's a combination of things. I think we're having mom and dad are older than they used to be. Mom and dad are fatter than they used to be. Our world has become more and more unfriendly. We have more and more environmental issues. And then I think we have a more stressful world. And I think we have, when I was a kid, I'm 66 years old. I was a kid, get out of the house, go play, come back at 12 and there's lunch. And then after you had lunch, okay, get out of the house. I'm going to start, come home and eat dinner. I mean, we were out and we climbed in trees and we had tree houses and we rode our bikes and we did this. And, you don't see that. And part of it is just because from a safety standpoint, because we have so many, we have to be concerned about our children, but we have all these gadgets and gimmickries. So we don't have a good balance, in life early on. We don't have the right brain needs those big muscles climbing and doing things like that. And we're on these little digital things. We're just slamming our left brain. And generally in society is becoming more and more left brain, as a world, we're more logical, practical, less empathetic, sympathetic, nurturing in there. Our left brain is, and what we see like in these kids, the left brain is basically anger and happy. So as long as you get what you want, you're happy. And when you don't, you're angry. And then the right brain is almost everything else. So embarrassment, So yeah, that's kind of it. So, when we have filtering problems as a child, sometimes as adults, we can go through, we still have filtering problems.
And as they're diagnosed with these disorders, what's the emotional impact on the child? What's the emotional impact on the family after diagnosis?
Well, these kids are struggling, so I can still remember, if you're having trouble reading and, you get called up in the front of the class and you're mumbly jumbling, you can't do that. Or they show you a picture and you see, we actually we just did this last class. We show these pictures, have you ever seen the picture and, okay, what is it? Okay, well, some people just can't see it. And so they kind of feel left out. But, it's very hard on a family if you have a child diagnosed with ADHD in the United States. Let's say it's $5,000 to raise a normal neurodevelopmental kid, just to put, food on the table and clothes on at average. Mm-hmm. Obviously, some have more, some have less. But if you have an ADHD child, it's more like 15,000. And if you have an autistic child, it's like 30,000. And that's just trying to put Band-Aids on it. That's just like getting into school, keeping out of trouble. So the cool thing about what we do, I studied with a gentleman by the name of Robert Melillo, who wrote Disconnected Kids, Reconnected Kids, and a textbook on autism. So any of you listening there that you have any children, those are awesome books to do that. But we're able, the vast majority of these cases is get these kids fixed in a few months. So they're declassified and they're functioning again. And of course, that takes a huge financial burden off this family for the next 10, 15, 20 years. We still have boys 25, 26 living with mom and dad because they can't get a job. This is 3 to 4 1 boys have this ADHD and autism. So it's more prevalent in boys. Mm-hmm. And so again, Yeah, just from a society, if we think about it, these kids, if we got 1 in 4 or 5 kids, if we can't get them functional, who is taking care of us, and how are we growing society?
Mm,
So it's a big problem, and
mm.
fortunately, there's solutions out there, and it's fun. So it's I get more enjoyment out of this than anything in my life.
I remember when I was diagnosed with my linear sequential learning disability. I was in remedial therapy for about 5 years, and my mum had sold her business and spent a lot of her time caring for me. And I could only imagine the cost to them financially back at that stage. So dad was always working, mum was taking care of me, and I'd go to school. And I remember having those experiences, being in the room, trying to read what was on the paper. It made sense to me, what I was saying, but nobody else could make sense of my mumbling or jumbling up of the words. And I remember looking at these report cards, and it was so disheartening because I was showing up to school every day. I was giving my 100%, but I'd always get this feedback. If Daniel just paid a little bit more attention, if Daniel was a little bit more committed to his work, he would be a good student. And in my mind, not being able to communicate this, I thought to myself, to the teacher, you can't see what I'm attempting to do. You can't see me trying to put in all of this effort just to put up with the other kids. And so year after year, the reports came back. The grades got lower. If Daniel tried a little bit harder, if he paid a little bit more attention, he'd be a great student. And I remember by the age of 11, I really started to feel that maybe I was a waste of space because I didn't fit in, because I was often singled out, put outside, asked to leave the room. Maybe there was something wrong with me and I didn't fit in. And I even had those thoughts, maybe it would be better if I wasn't here. I didn't say I want to commit suicide, but I thought to myself, maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe I should give the space to somebody else. And as I got older and I was going through the remedial therapy, I started to realize that I was a lot bigger in stature, in frame. I was getting older, but all the kids were really young. So I started to think, what if people saw me in this room? And so eventually in school, they took me out of one class and they put me in another room. And it was called the Space Lab. And I thought the Space Lab was for the smart kids, the kids who were going to be astronauts. But it was for the kids who were just off the bloody planet and they didn't know what to do. And so I got out of primary school and I went to high school and I went to an academic school and I was forever in trouble. And as you were talking about the right brain before, I loved music, I loved cooking, I loved PE, I loved techniques and woodworking. And I would always thrive in those classrooms. But then in my academic classrooms, it would be like, Daniel, why are you using coloured pens? And the senior master would ring my mum. Mrs. Tolson, it is the senior master of boys. I have to make a report on Daniel. Did you know your son is using coloured pens in class? She would say something like, isn't that what a child would do? Well, we'll have to come down and speak to the senior master. My mum was forever getting called in, but it was a conflict because there was things that I was interested in and there was things that I wasn't interested in. And as I grew up, I realized that the things that I was interested in, I had motivation. But things like computer science, I never understood why I was learning this. And I couldn't articulate this back in the 90s. But I used to sit in class and I'd say, okay, you're teaching me all of this stuff, but what's in it for me? How am I going to use that? And I found it as a disabled learner at that stage, what I was missing was this reason why. If somebody would have said to me, Daniel, in the future, you're going to run an international business, you're going to train thousands of people around the world, you're going to use science and technology, and you've got to be able to access computers and iPads, I would have given them 100% of my attention. But even after I finished school, I was still trying to figure out 10 years later, why was I actually learning how to type? So for me, the emotional impact carried on for years. And when I joined Emirates Airlines, I then had to do type rating tests for different aircrafts. I would do all the study, but I'd come into the exam and I'd fail. And I started to repeat these patterns that I'd got out of 15 to 20 years before, but I realized they'd come back to haunt me. So my emotional impact, it wasn't the trauma at school, but it created those problems after school as well. So I believe that I have done my best to be able to solve this problem to the best of my ability. I know that it's impacted me throughout my careers. What are you seeing? How does it impact people's interpersonal skills? How does it impact their intrapersonal skills once they get out of school and into the real world of careers and business?
Yeah, I think you bring up another point is that some in schools, particularly back 80s and 90s, that we had one way to do school. Fortunately enough, there's different ways to do that. And in fact, I work with a child neuropsychologist in our clinic in Naples, Florida, and he actually has a school. So they gear the school to teaching a little bit for the deficits, so that the person's able to catch up. But one of the things that you touched on, touched my heart, is the self-esteem problem people have, and and you're thinking, geez, everybody can do that, but me, I can't do that. What's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. So when we work with children and adults, here's the thing. You have strengths, and almost every child who has these weaknesses has some really good strengths that offset them. So we have, it's one of the things from a communication standpoint is say, look, you do something really well. And usually they know what they can do really well, or the mom knows what they do. And that's what you focus on. But these other things are weak, and we just need to strengthen. We're going to, everything you can do good is going to stay there. We just need to strengthen these things up a little bit, and then your life will be less stressful. So I probably talked to people, even kids, about stress. They know what a 10-year-old, they know what stress is. And say, wouldn't it be nice to be de-stressed? Wouldn't it be nice not to feel like that all the time? And they act out and they shut down, and that because of that, some of those feelings as well, then they don't care, and sometimes they give up.
That self-esteem, we see that a lot in adults. It's
Sure.
that feeling of self-worth. Am I worthy of the pay rise? I don't think so. I better not ask. Am I worthy of the success that'll come if I do succeed in business? Probably not. Maybe I should start to sabotage my own success. And we see a different side of this in coaching. And definitely it impacts their self-esteem, their self-image, and even their self-ideal, the person who they want to become. They find it very difficult. And one of my experiences at school was going through the learning disabilities. I went through a stage where I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to be like the other people, which for me in my mind was just for things to be easy, for things to be able to learn easy and get good grades. But then when I got older, I wanted to not be like them, and I wanted to be more like me, because I realized, as you mentioned here, I had special talents and gifts. But now I had to find a place that was going to reward those special gifts outside of the typical system. And when I was learning the work of Dr. Edward de Bono back in the late 80s, I started to rediscover his work in the mid-2000s. And he talked about the field of lateral thinking. Now, for me, I couldn't articulate that I was a lateral thinker when I was 10 or 11, because I was told I couldn't learn sequentially. But I knew my mind could connect all these dots in all these other places. And once I learned about lateral thinking, I went, that's how my mind works. And then I found hypnosis. And as soon as I got my hands on hypnosis, it worked for me. And I said, well, that's how my mind works. I'm going to focus on that. And it brought me so much joy. And I found that hypnosis for me was easy to learn. It was almost second nature. But I had to, first of all, break through some of those old thought patterns, getting out of that I want to be like everybody else, to understanding that it's okay to be different, and different can actually be rewarded in the business world. And that's how it's benefited me over the years. Now, for those people who are left untreated, it's overlooked by the school system, or their parents are just not aware of it. What are some of the negative consequences as they get older by leaving this untreated?
Yeah, I think the things that, I'm always a solution. I knew how can we fix it, but the reality is this has happened, and this happened to kids I knew, I grew up with. I can think about, and unfortunately, what they usually do is they get in trouble. They have impulsive things. They run around with other kids that are impulsive. They get arrested. Um, they get car crashes. They have trouble holding jobs, because if they had trouble sitting in the class and behaving in class, they're probably going to have trouble in a brick and mortar, following the rules and doing things like that too. So they're going to say and do things that will get them in trouble. So, yeah, so the reality is, and we have then high drug addiction also with that, because people don't feel well. I mean, they're anxious. They're really, people drinking a lot and smoking pot, or doing whatever they take or get a prescription drug. They're just trying to calm down. They're just trying to feel better. They're self-medicating. So there's a whole lot of that going on out there. And, back when they were doing the opioids, and, it was really bad, because, you could get hooked in a week. 25% of people have one round of that, and they were an addict. And it wasn't like kids doing that. This was like 50-year-olds or 60-year-olds after getting surgery or something. So those are some of the negatives on there. But again, if people can get channeled in a positive way, and like you said, when there's nothing wrong with we're not trying to get everybody the same. We're not trying to conform everybody. We want that uniqueness. We want those different things. It's just that it's just when it becomes a stumbling block, and it actually keeps us from being successful, because we're self-sabotaging ourselves all the time. By creating negative problems within our family, or our friends, or our work.
The Cleveland Clinic, one of the world leaders in brain research, they said that we have about 60,000 thoughts per day. About 95% of those repeat, and 80% are negative in nature. And over the years, I've heard a lot of people's self-talk as I've talked to them. And they say things like, I am who I am. You can't teach old dogs new tricks. It's too late for me. And I hear this self-talk, but there's also this new emerging field of neuroplasticity. And I'd like to be able to explore that with you today. What is neuroplasticity?
Yeah, neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to rewire, reweight, and reroute itself. And we see this all the time. And, one of the things you're talking about, I have kids come in and they're doing a game or something. They're like going, "You're so stupid. You're an idiot. You suck." And you're going, "Oh my God, this is like a 9-year-old is talking about themselves like this. What's going to happen in 10 years? But the neuroplasticity, you have to really consciously, we all have to do this, because there's so much negative stuff out there. And the way the world's being run right now, they're purposely making us try to be angry or afraid. And so, we really have to all have some kind of a program to do this, read some scripture every day, meditate. One of the tools that we use a lot, and we recommend almost all our patients, is a little tool called Brain Tap, which is developed by a guy named Patrick Porter, a friend of mine. And we do brain mapping on people, and then we figure out where their imbalances are. Then we have it's a home therapy. So I call it's like the personal gym for your brain. So it's a de-stressor. We all need to be able to learn how to de-stress. So this de-stresses our brain and gives us adaptability and flexibility back in our thinking. And so that's one of the tools we do. And it has lots of audio talk therapy in it. And Patrick has this very magnetic voice. He actually used to work in Vegas as a hypnotist. And like when I do it, I'm asleep in like 7 minutes every time I listen to it. I don't think I've ever heard the whole thing. But for me, it really de-stresses me, and it's so that's one of the tools we have. And so we try to get people to get a tool and give them a way to de-stress and a path to improve.
So if we want to learn more about the work that you're doing, what can we take away from your website, drkellymiller.com?
Yeah, so we have on there, we have testimonies, but we also have a YouTube station. I've got over 100 different videos on there. So we have, we talk about, I wrote this book, Saving Your Brain Out of Self-Preservation. I was trying to figure out what was wrong with my brain. At about 55, I spent 3 years doing that, and each letter is an acronym. So we go through, like, S is for sleep, A is for autonomic balance. We're talking about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, V's for vitamins, minerals. So each one has that. We have videos on that. We have videos on breathing. One of the things we can, so we just try to have a lot of information there for people, resources. And we also have case histories on different conditions, and we show them, and how we treat and evaluate, how we evaluate and treat those people.
Now, you've also got another website there called Saving Your Brain. If we went to Saving Your Brain, what can we learn from Saving Your Brain?
Yeah, there we have all our technologies that we use in the clinic. We have a half a dozen or 6 or 8 different technologies that we use, and how we train people. And again, we have links there to the YouTube station. We have testimonies, and we have under resources, we'll have video links, and we show all these different ways that we can do this. So many times we engage with people, we have them come in and we evaluate and treat them, but then we're helping them develop a strategy at home. How can they keep themselves progressing at home?
Fascinating. I believe this is just so important for somebody like myself who has been challenged with learning disabilities in the past. And I was very blessed that we had great support at that time. But for those people who are kind of waking up now, and you're realizing that maybe there's something that hasn't been diagnosed, it's really important that, from my perspective, if you want to live your very best life, then you've also got to attend to some of these brain imbalances. And you've got a great resource here today with Dr. Kelly Miller, and I encourage you to go over to both of his websites right now. Go to drkellymiller.com, check out what he's doing. Also head over to savingyourbrain.com and learn about the technology. Because I believe with technology today, we're also very blessed that it can accelerate us. And some of these technologies that I've seen, it can shave 5, 10, even 15 years off your learning curve. I know some of the technology that I've used to understand my emotions over the years. Within 60 minutes of understanding my emotional makeup, I understood why I made the decisions that I did in the past and why I have certain preferences about my future. And it helped me understand who I was, gave me clarity, and then I got back my confidence. So I want you to head over to drkellymiller.com, and I want you to head over to savingyourbrain.com also. Now, Dr. Kelly Miller, for people who feel ashamed about their diagnosis, people who are ashamed to go and see a specialist because they fear that they might be diagnosed, what is some words of advice that would encourage them to take that next step to seek professional help?
Yeah, well, there's, I mentioned a guy named Dr. Robert Melillo, and there's people that have trained with him throughout the world. So I would go to his website also, and as a reference to try to find someone. But that's what I talked about earlier. We talk about strengths and weaknesses. I don't put a classification because names have connotations and have images and that. So we all have strengths and weaknesses. It's just, we're going to help you be able to use your strengths really, and keep the weak areas from sabotaging you, to keep you, preventing you from doing the things that you're successful, because we all have ability to do things. We all have extraordinary, everybody is unique, and everybody has an extraordinary talent.
Do it, ladies and gentlemen. If you've been to 100x DNA, you know that your DNA can stretch from where you are today to the sun and back more than 300 times. We know from some of the reports coming out of Stanford Brain Institute that we use less than 2% of our potential. Now, we have within us all the skills, all the resources to be, do, and have anything that we've ever wanted. So pull the trigger today, jump on the website, go to drkellymiller.com, go over to savingyourbrain.com and check out what you can do with your brain. Dr. Kelly, thank you so much for being here with us today. greatly appreciate your time and your insights into this field. Thank you so much.
Daniel, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, do it now. Go over to drkellymiller.com. Links are in the show notes. Have a wonderful day. And remember, one new idea at the right time can change your life. Ciao for now.